Have you ever had a neighbor so obnoxious, so entitled that it felt like they were trying to push you into becoming the villain of your own story? That's exactly how it started with Rick, my next-door neighbor. At first, I thought he was just a car enthusiast. He had 6 cars all polished to a blinding shine and a massive 70-foot driveway that could easily fit all of them. But no, Rick chose to use only one spot on his driveway. The rest of his fleet scattered across the neighborhood like landmines blocking other people's homes' driveways, and even fire hydrants. I'm Mark, by the way, just a regular guy who loves his lawn. It's not just grass to me, it's peace routine, something to take pride in. My front yard runs parallel to Rick's driveway, and I've got sprinklers lining the edge to keep things green and healthy. At least I thought they were working. A few weeks ago, I noticed some brown patches like something was off. When I checked closer, I found not 1, not 2, but 3 sprinkler heads snapped clean off. Tire tracks led right from Rick's driveway onto my lawn. I fixed them, told myself it was an accident, and moved on. But then it happened again and again. And that was the moment I realized Rick didn't care. Not about the neighborhood, not about my lawn, and definitely not about boundaries. But if Rick didn't respect boundaries, maybe it was time I stopped respecting his paint job. What happened next? Let's just say I got creative. Rick wasn't just careless. He was the kind of guy who wore his arrogance like cologne, loud and impossible to ignore. Every Saturday morning at exactly 8 a.m., he'd blast 80s rock, pull out a microfiber cloth, and start detailing his baby, a jet black Dodge Charger parked right at the edge of his driveway, just inches from my lawn. He polished that thing like it was sacred while the rest of his cars lounged around the block like overfed cats. A lifted truck squatted in front of the Johnson's house, a rust-red Corvette sat crooked in front of the McKays, and an ancient BMW missing a mirror somehow always found its way near the fire hydrant. No one said a word, probably out of exhaustion. Me, I kept quiet too. At first, I'm not a confrontational guy. I mow my lawn water, my plants wave politely when neighbors walk by. But with every new sprinkler head I had to replace, my patience wore thinner. Rick's wife, Lori, was a different story. She was polite, even sweet in passing, but it was obvious Rick made the decisions, or maybe just didn't listen. The neighborhood had a homeowners association, but enforcement was spotty. Unless someone complained loudly and repeatedly, nothing ever happened. And that wasn't my style, or at least it didn't used to be. But there's only so many times a man can watch his lawn get run over before something in him starts to shift. I wasn't looking for revenge yet, but I was watching. Every move, every tire track, every smirk Rick gave as he revved his engine past my broken sprinklers. He thought it was a joke. He thought I'd just keep fixing things quietly. But every Saturday as he polished that Charger to perfection, I started to imagine it covered in hard water stains. It all came to a head one Wednesday morning. I stepped outside with my coffee expecting my usual quiet start to the day, but instead, I found a mess again. 2 more sprinkler heads were shattered plastic shards scattered like confetti across my lawn. But this time, it wasn't just the heads. The pipe beneath had been crushed, leaving a muddy crater where green should have been. And the kicker, fresh tire marks veering off Rick's driveway and slicing a diagonal wound straight across my grass. Not even subtle, not even trying to hide it anymore. I stood there, steam rising from my cup, my blood boiling to match. This wasn't an accident. This was routine. Rick had turned my lawn into his personal turning radius. It wasn't about space, he had plenty of that. It was about convenience, entitlement, maybe even dominance. And suddenly I saw it so clearly. Rick didn't just take space. He claimed it. I didn't yell, didn't knock on his door. Instead, I went to the hardware store that afternoon with a very specific plan forming in my head. I bought replacement sprinkler heads, but not the same kind. This time I grabbed full circle 360-degree rotators, ones that would spray everything in reach, including anything parked nearby. I also adjusted the timer to 11 p.m. sharp, Rick's favorite time to tuck his precious charger in for the night, right on the edge of my grass. That evening, I installed the new setup, double-checked the alignment, and set my phone alarm. When the clock struck 11, I stepped outside, barely peeking past the curtain. The hiss of the sprinklers kicked in, and for 7 glorious minutes, they danced. And Rick's spotless charger. It got a front row seat to the show. Let the petty games begin. The next morning, I was up earlier than usual, not for work, not for coffee, just to see. I stepped onto my porch pretending to stretch, and there it was, Rick's prized Dodge Charger, now wearing a constellation of white, crusty water spots across its glossy black paint. The sun hadn't even fully risen, but those hard water stains were already baking in like little scars. I smiled into my mug. Rick didn't say anything that day, but I noticed him circling the car more than usual. He sprayed it down with a hose, wiped it with one of those overpriced towels, but the stains didn't budge. That's the thing about the water in our area, it's loaded with minerals. Once it dries on paint, it takes more than elbow grease to fix it. You need polish, maybe even a full detailing session. I figured he'd get the message. Park somewhere else. Problem solved. But Rick, he doubled down. The next night, same time, same spot. Like clockwork. I watched from my window again, 11 p.m. Sprinklers hissed to life, and the charger got another full soak. At this point, it wasn't about damage, it was about pride. And Rick had too much of it to admit defeat. He even shifted the car half a foot back, probably thinking that would make the difference. It didn't. By the third night, I heard it the slam of a car door, followed by loud cursing through the cool air. Something about paint damage and neighbor harassment. I stayed inside quiet. Not smug, just satisfied. I hadn't touched his car, hadn't spoken a word, but I was reclaiming my lawn one spray at a time, and I knew it was only a matter of time before he snapped. It didn't take long. On the fourth night, just as I was settling into bed, there was a knock. No, a pounding at my front door. I didn't even need to look through the peephole. I knew exactly who it was. Rick stood there in a t-shirt, gym shorts, and flip-flops, his hair a mess and his face redder than a brake light. Behind him, I could see his charger gleaming under the street lamp, except now, instead of gleaming, it looked like it had been driven through a powdered donut shop. "You think this is funny?" he barked the moment I opened the door. "You're ruining my damn car." I blinked, feigning confusion. "Sorry, your sprinklers," he growled, pointing wildly. "They're spraying my car. You know what hard water does to black paint." I kept my tone calm. "You mean the sprinklers on my property? The ones you keep driving over?" He flinched, clearly not expecting pushback. "There's no proof of that." "Oh, really?" I stepped outside and pointed to the still fresh tire tracks slicing across my grass. "Because that looks a lot like proof." Just then, Lori appeared on their porch in a robe, arms crossed, face tight with embarrassment. "Rick, come on, not like this." But Rick was on a roll. "I'm calling the HOA. This is targeted harassment." I shrugged. "Feel free. I've got receipts for every sprinkler I've replaced." He stormed off, muttering threats under his breath. Lori lingered for a second, then mouthed, "Sorry," before following him inside. I stood there for a minute, letting the night air cool me off. Rick thought he'd scare me, but he was playing checkers and I was already playing chess with irrigation. 2 days later, I got a letter taped to my door, neatly folded HOA letterhead, the whole deal. Apparently, Rick had followed through on his threat. The complaint, intentional water overspray causing damage to a neighbor's personal property. I'll admit I laughed out loud. The irony of a man with 6 cars who treated my lawn like a racetrack, playing the victim because of a little water that was rich. Later that afternoon, Tom from the HOA knocked. Tom's one of those guys who looks like he's always trying not to pick sides. Khakis, clipboard, polite smile. He cleared his throat like he was rehearsing for a courtroom drama. "Hey, Mark, we got a report from Rick about your sprinklers. Mind if I take a look?" "Not at all," I said, leading him right to the edge of the lawn. You might want to watch your step. Broken pipes don't exactly fix themselves. I showed him the replaced heads, the receipts, even the photos I'd started taking of the tire tracks. Not out of pettiness, okay? Maybe a little, but mostly because I knew this day would come. Tom squatted down, inspecting everything carefully. Well, it's definitely your property and your system. But honestly, if he's parking that close and your sprinklers are within code, he doesn't have much of a case. He scratched his head. Maybe just dial it back. Less pressure, I smiled. Of course. I'll consider it. As Tom left, he paused. Between us, I think he's more upset about the spots than the water. That night, I got a surprise. Lori messaged me privately on Facebook. Just one line. Honestly, well played. For the first time in weeks, I slept like a baby. After the HOA visit and Lori's unexpected message, I figured maybe Rick would take the hint. For 2 nights, the Charger didn't show up on the edge of my lawn. I thought he'd finally surrendered. Maybe he parked further up the driveway. Maybe he got tired of scrubbing calcium spots off his paint job at midnight. For a brief moment, peace returned to the block. Then came Friday. Around 10:45 p.m., I peeked through the blinds and spotted him out there backing in carefully inch by inch, his Charger once again hugging the border of my lawn like it was magnetic. But this time, he had a new trick, a plastic tarp propped up like a sad little barricade between his car and my sprinklers. It was duct taped to thin metal stakes and leaned at an angle like a homemade riot shield. I couldn't help but laugh. I mean, I had to give the guy points for effort, but also, was this seriously the hill he wanted to die on? The next morning, I snapped a few photos of the setup and emailed them straight to Tom at the HOA. Why? Because the tarp clearly violated community guidelines, unsanctioned structures, temporary installations without approval, and it was ugly as hell. By Monday, the verdict came and Rick had 24 hours to remove it or face fines. That night, I watched from my window as he silently tore the tarp down in the dark. No cursing this time, no door pounding, just quiet defeat. Even Lori didn't come out. He didn't park near the lawn again after that. No apology, no acknowledgement, but that empty patch of grass where his Charger used to sit, it was the most beautiful spot on my lawn. Weeks passed and Rick's Charger never came near my lawn again. It was almost eerie, like a ghost had been exorcised from that stretch of grass. He started parking way up in his own driveway where he should have been all along. The other 5 cars, slowly but surely, they began to disappear too. One day the truck was gone. Then the rusty Corvette vanished. Eventually even the ancient BMW stopped showing up. I heard from a neighbor that Rick had rented a storage unit outside of town. Either he was trying to save face or Lori had finally put her foot down. Honestly, I didn't care which. Lori waved to me now. Not every day, but when she did, it felt different. Like she saw me less as the guy with the sprinklers and more as the guy who'd stood his ground. And Rick, he didn't even look my way. If we crossed paths, he'd suddenly be fascinated by his phone or walk a little faster. It was subtle, but it was something. I kept my sprinklers just the way they were, full 360, 11 p.m., sharp. Not out of spite anymore, just as a reminder. A silent little message coded into water droplets. Respect my space, and I'll respect yours. And maybe that's what made it all worth it. Not the water spots, not the HOA drama, but the fact that I didn't roll over. I didn't yell. Didn't key a car or slash a tire. I just let the water do the talking, and it spoke loud enough. Funny how something as simple as sprinklers could say what words never could. Sometimes I still catch myself glancing out the window at 11 p.m., half expecting to see Rick's Charger gliding into that old spot like a bad habit. But it never happens. That corner of my lawn, once trampled and torn up by his tires, is now the greenest stretch on the block. I even reseeded it not out of necessity, but out of pride. Like I was healing something deeper than just grass. Neighbors started noticing too. A few asked what fertilizer I was using. One guy joked that I must have made a deal with the lawn gods. I just smiled and said consistency and boundaries, and somehow that became my mantra. People always talk about standing up for yourself like it has to be loud, dramatic, or angry, but sometimes it's quieter than that. Sometimes standing up means fixing the same broken sprinkler 3 times until you finally say enough. It means fighting back not with fists or fury, but with hard water and a 360-degree spray radius. I didn't want a war. I just wanted peace and maybe a little bit of respect. But in this neighborhood, peace sometimes comes with a hose, a timer, and the patience to let karma do its work, one mineral stain at a time. So, yeah, maybe I was petty, maybe I weaponized my landscaping, but you know what? My lawns never looked better. And Rick, well, he learned something too. He might still have 6 cars, but now he knows exactly where not to park. So tell me, was I the jerk here, or did I just outsmart the neighborhood bully? You decide. Drop your take in the comments, and if you've ever gotten sweet petty revenge with a garden hose, hit that like button.